Andy is a 1978 grad of the Carroll School of Management and has been our dean since January of 2005. Those of us who have worked with Andy for a year or more now know that with Andy, lunch is always a working affair. And so you're going to get a good taste of that with Dean Boynton today. What you're going to see is a variation on some of the work that he has done around the world with Credit Suisse, with institutions in London, and his focus is on virtuoso teamwork. He's got very high expectations of what should happen when teams come together, and he's been able to study this across a variety of different contexts. Those of you who are fans, and I know there must be some in this audience, of the New York Yankees might be interested to know that George Steinbrenner has a blurb on the back of Andy's book on Virtuoso Teams. So he's either doing something very right or something very wrong. So without further ado, Andy Boynton.
There it is, okay. Greetings, everybody. What I'd like to do is just give you a sense of what we're going to do today together. And I got a bunch of flip charts that are going to be flying around the room in a minute, just to give us a sense of orientation and what we're going to do. The first point is this. I'm not used to doing this with young people your age. I'm used to doing it with people older, more experienced, probably not as smart. But for me, I'm looking at you as effective leaders right now, as people that want to learn, and great leaders learn all the time. So for me, we're in a classroom right now. I'm going to try to leave you with some ideas, some thoughts, and leave you here a more effective leader at BC and beyond BC. So you've got to work, we're going to have fun, but this is kind of executive education for undergraduate population, all right? And what we're going to do today is, just to give you a sense of the agenda, we're going to have a brief opening here, and I'll describe that in a minute, but we're going to have a case study. A lot of the concepts I work with and ideas and trying to make it real for people lend themselves much more to seeing it in action rather than just talking about it. So we're going to have a case study on video. Now after the case study, we're going to have you all just discuss very quickly at your table what your reactions were. We're going to do that a certain way. And then we're going to open it up for question and answers and just discussions. What were your impressions from the case study? And I'll kind of run that conversation. Then after that, we have 3 experts in the room, 3 senior leaders who we're going to use as experts and learn more about leadership that way. All right? And to do that, we have Bob Winston. Bob, who's right at this table. You can stand up briefly, Bob Winston. And the name of the Center for Leadership and Ethics being called Winston, it's not a coincidence that Bob Winston is here. So Bob is an alumnus of Boston College, and he has made the Winston Center possible for us. The other expert we're going to have in the room is Chuck Clow. Chuck, where are you? Chuck Clow, another alumnus of Boston College. And later on today, there's going to be the Clow Colloquium, where David McCullough, the author, comes, and that's Chuck's contribution to Boston College and all of us in these kind of enduring initiatives. They're going to last long beyond you're at Boston College, or maybe I'm at Boston College. These are permanent initiatives that will serve many students here for years to come. The third person here is the person who made the Chambers Lecture Series possible, which is focused at undergraduates and the whole undergraduate population of Boston College. Norm Chambers. Norm? Did you say that, Norm? Thank you. So those 3 experts will constitute a panel after we discuss the case study. They'll share some thoughts about leadership, then we'll have a chance for you to ask them questions. Now we're going to look at a case study, and the video we're going to look at is Apollo 13. How many of you have seen Apollo 13? Great, we're going to see it again. We should be out of here in about 2.5 hours, about 2 hours, 18 minutes to watch it. But we're going to look at video clips out of Apollo 13. Now why Apollo 13? Apollo 13 is a great example of a virtuoso team. By virtuoso team, which I've studied and written about, and you're going to be involved with, if not now, in your life. We're talking about a team of virtuosos, of very talented people trying to do something extraordinary. So Apollo 13, 1970, space program, If you were in the world at that time and you wanted to be involved with the space program, you either wanted to be in Houston, Texas, or you wanted to be somewhere in the Soviet Union, because that was about it. All right? And we're going to be looking at Houston, Texas. And we're going to look at how, through Apollo 13, this team operates. So that's the lens we're going to study leadership and teamwork today. And we're going to look at these selected clips in a minute. But before we do, we're going to do a little bit differently. We have what I'm going to call a case study challenge. And the case study challenge is this. I am quickly now going to go through key concepts that are in this video case. And each team, we're going to have a team competition by table. And the idea is when I go through these concepts, you've got to find the concept in the case study. Where was it? Describe where it was. And then why is it a key concept? What does it have to do with great leadership or great teamwork? Fair enough? You with me? You know, I know you're eating that fruit salad and eating your fine, but you got to one thing about being a great knowledge professional, you got to learn a parallel process real early in life, right? So you got to eat, you got to listen, you're going to be talking all at the same time. So this is going to be our case study challenge that we're going to have this afternoon. So watching the video, you're going to find it, describe it, and why is it a key concept? Now, what are these concepts? The first one is that leadership must come from every seat. Leadership in organizations, it is not just about title, it's not just about hierarchy, it's not just about who's the boss, it has to come from every seat. Enough said, that's a key concept. We'll see where it emerges. Another point is that leaders must infect their teams with optimism and energy, and positive energy. So effective leaders have to infect their team with optimism and positive energy. Okay? Down here, we'll see where, yep, you gotta move it. I'm going to leave these up here so you can refer to them as you watch the video and in the buzz groups after. Leadership equals passion. All the firms I work with, there's certain inherent leadership, and my research where leadership is an element of passion that has to exist. Another key concept is great teams have leaders that give meaning and get the attention. Now, one of the things when you look at these, you might be saying, these are obvious, right? Passion, leadership has to come from every seat, leaders have to have optimism. What I've found in organizations, and what's tricky here, and you might see it now, but you're going to be seeing it when you move into the big world, is organizations have a way of sucking the energy out of people. They have a way of reducing the energy. They have a way of kind of dumbing everything down where everything becomes we. Right? And compromise enters into the equation. You know, good enough is fine. So you'll see that, and what the great leaders do with talented teams is they somehow kind of plow through that iron cage of bureaucracy and really energize the people. And on the virtuoso teams that I've studied, and in your life, as a leader, you're leaders now in this university, you're going to be leaders soon in charge of projects. We're not talking about leadership where you're trying to lead people to carry more or it's based on the strength of their back, right? You're trying to extract as much of their knowledge, as much of their passion, as much of their insights as you possibly can. You want to get their best ideas, their best insights onto the table. So that's this notion of virtuoso teams and knowledge professionals. It's going to be the world you're living in. Another key element of leadership is that leadership is a contact sport. Leadership is a contact sport. It doesn't happen from the office, somebody's office at headquarters. It doesn't happen on the 25th floor. It doesn't happen just in a cubicle. It happens in terms of a contact sport, belly to belly, elbow to elbow. Great leaders get out there and are involved with their teams. You're going to have to do it, and you'll be involved with leaders who either do it or don't do it, and you'll see the effect. Just a few more points I'd like to make about leadership before we see the case study. Great leaders listen. One of my strengths. Great leaders listen. And a lot of this, if you think about the people in this room, the students who are leading, us that are leading, and you wonder if we're doing all these things, and we're not, but we have to aspire to be better and better. Listening is key. Why hire really smart people? Why be hired into an organization as a really smart person if no one's going to listen to you? One of the first things I would pay attention to if I were you when you come out of here, and even now while you're involved in leadership activities, are you listening to others, and are people listening to you? So leaders listen. And finally, the third point, or the last point, is polite teams give us polite results. So oftentimes, we see it now, and you see it in your lives, is we strive for politeness and consensus and getting along, sometimes rather than getting a great result. And we're not after polite results. Virtuoso teams and great teams are after great results. And sometimes things can't be polite. They have to be direct. People have to argue. People have to get mad. As long as there's mutual respect, it can work out. But politeness, if it's an end in itself, isn't going to get us great results. So these are some ideas. If we look up at the panel there, just some concepts around leadership. Polite teams, leaders giving meaning and attention, leaders listen, infecting a team with optimism, leadership happens from every seat, leadership as a contact sport. As we look at this case study, what I want you to think about is, where are these up there? Or maybe you see something else. I don't want to constrain you, but I want to give you some sense of what I want you to look for, find it. I want you to be able to describe it. And then why is it important? Why was it important in the case study that we're going to look at right now? So we're going to go to the moon. All right, we got about 12 minutes, selected clips from Apollo 13. And then afterwards, you're going to discuss it at your tables. Then we'll open it up for a kind of a broad discussion and see what we can find. Ian, thanks.
What I'd like you to do now is, first of all, the movie, we've seen great cast and so forth. It's a very accurate representation of what happened. And I've read the flight logs and so forth. I mean, to the extent they could almost take the lines verbatim, they did. So it's almost a pseudo-documentary of what happened during Apollo 13. The other point is, it's a crisis, but I don't want us to think about it as a crisis. I think about it as a surprise. You're going to work as leaders, as managers, in organizations that face surprises. And so how do you respond to surprises, whether it's competitive surprises, market surprises, consumer surprises, regulatory surprises. Things are going to happen when your plan will go awry. And they face that situation. What did they do? So right now in buzz groups, just on your table, in buzz groups to kind of parallel process ideas. And this is a technique that General Electric, by the way, invented. So learn from the methodology is when they run their meetings, they get right into these buzz groups and they try to solve problems with everybody involved at all levels. Because I don't want to have one person. I could easily right now say, what do you think, Paul, and Kelly, what do you think, and Jerry, what do you think? We can go around the room sequentially. But every time you get smart people together, you want to move ideas as much as possible. So buzz groups are about moving ideas. So 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'll just come in and interrupt. What did we see here in this case study related to some of these key points? Find it, describe it, and so what? What does it mean? And you might have seen other things up here that aren't related that you want to talk about. So right now in your new teams, discuss the case study with respect to what I presented earlier, right? So start buzzing. Buzz. Everybody get involved. Good idea to introduce yourself. Always kind of a socially awkward moment, but get through that and start buzzing. Buzz groups. I know you're having great conversations, but what I'd like to do is, I know we're eating, and so we're going to try to finesse this, is ask people to speak loud enough. If they don't, I'll repeat it. And we'll try to have a pseudo conversation right here to highlight some of the learning from the case study. linking them to points made earlier and your own new points. Let me start with, I think, David. Where's David? David? Right over here. David, thank you for volunteering. David, you were talking about everybody was getting involved. I mean, let's just, why? Why was everybody involved? What was the underlying issues around leadership and teamwork that got the involvement? So I'm going to go with David, and then if other people had thoughts around that, I want to see your hands go up and we can disagree or agree or whatever. David? Real loud.
There was something that we discussed that there was actually no correct plan, so dropping as many people in the different ideas kind of would foster maybe more creativity and solutions.
Okay, so there was no plan?
There was no concrete plan prior to what the team was now, so kind of opening it up to.
Okay, so there's no concrete plan, right? So they had no concrete plan, so obviously everybody got involved because there was no prescribed way to proceed. Do we agree with that? Was there no plan at any point? How did they handle it? They went off to space with no plan? How many agree with David? They had no plan when they went out into space. David, not many hands are up. Well, let me come back to, did they have a plan? Okay, so they had a plan. What did they do with the plan? They threw it out, right? I mean, the leader came into the room and said what? Let's describe. What did he say? And the leader, by the way, is Gene Kranz, Ed Harris, person in the white vest. The leader came in the room and said, what do we do about the flight plan? Throw it out the window, right? So no plan, and we got all this involvement. Was there something between the no plan and all the involvement? What did the leader do to somehow bring all these people together? Justin? Okay, now I don't have a big board and I don't have a big display, but you got to listen. What Justin said was the plan was failure is not an option, right? So we have this failure, and I'm just going to write it up here for my benefit. Failure is not an option. So all of a sudden, does that give him the plan? Did he do anything more than that, Justin? Right? Okay, absolutely failure is not an option. What else did he do between dropping the plan and doing what David said, getting everybody involved? There were still some other steps in there, and I'll just insert them in a minute if I need to. Rochelle? Right. And I love what you're saying. He had to see the potential in every person. And the fact is, from Gene Kranz's point of view, those people are the tools to solving this problem. What's the people in the room? What are the people in the room? They call it the pit in Houston. What's their background? What do you think their educational background is? Yeah, and PhD upon PhD and all. What's Gene Kranz's, the leader's background? What do you think? Military, exactly, fighter pilot. So what's the relationship between the people in the room and Gene Kranz in terms of knowledge about how to solve this problem? They know a heck of a lot more than he does. He knows they know more than he knows, and they know more than he knows. And you will find this in your lives. And and later maybe we'll hear from Chuck, from Bob, and from Norm, because I suspect the people they lead know a lot more about the technical elements of the job than they do. And their job, like Gene Kranz's, is to elicit that knowledge. They are the tools to solving this. So he has got to get them on board and get them all involved, as David said. But in addition, okay, failure is not an option. What else did he do? Does anybody else remember? What about the drawing he made? Over there in the corner, real loud. It's Mac, right? What did he say, Mac? This better be good. What did he do? I'm giving you a hint. Okay. All right, so he took this thing and he said, basically, they're here, right? And we're here, and we've got to get them from here to here with time to spare, right? And they got to get them, and he drew it up there, and he said, failure's not an option. And how did he say it? And how did he draw it? And why did he draw it? Does it matter? What do you think? Does it matter in terms of what he did and how he did it?
Well, I think when he first they all kind of backed up and were like, this is too big, we can't, they saw no way around it, right? And then he said, he drew the picture on the board, gave them something visual, and said, look, he kind of minimized the problem, said, this is all we have to do, it's point A, point B, and then he goes, and then everyone was still paralyzed, and he says, listen, I want you to talk to this person,
Right.
he gave them a starting point, I said, listen, you don't know, you can't see point A to point B now, move in the direction,
Right.
and we'll figure it out.
Okay, and basically, he laid it out. And the point is, in terms of leadership, it's not just what you say, it's how you do it. He laid it out visually. Was anybody in that room unclear about what the goals and the objectives were in the new plan? Or the new objectives and goals? Was anybody unclear? And he said, failure is not an option. And walking out of the room, he said, we've never lost an American in space. We're sure as hell not going to lose one on my watch. Failure is not an option, and he leaves the room. The message by leaving the room is what? Get to it. You figure it out. You understand how to do this. I'm not going to micromanage it. You know what to do. So by doing this, laying out failure is not an option, emotionally charged, laying out a visualization, laying it out clearly. If we just come over here, I'm going to just see if this can be, if you can link this. If you look at all this stuff, what did he do to that team? They lost, they had no plan, they threw it out the window. Some of them are thinking we're never going to get them back. What did he do by doing that? Yeah. Okay, so the failure is not an option, and we saw several different times in this, reinfected the team with optimism. Do we remember that? Nixon wanted odds. What did he say? He didn't say 3-1. What movie were you watching? What were you doing, Rocco? He didn't say 3-1. The bureaucrats were saying 3-1. What did Gene Kranz say? We're not losing those men. We're not giving them odds. What did he say when they were talking about the typhoon warning and all this stuff? And the guy said it could be NASA's worst moment. It's going to be our finest hour. He's saying failure is not an option. So he infected the team with this energy, and by laying out this mission, he gave the team meaning and attention. I can tell you right now, as smart as they were, if he didn't bring together those people in the same room, face to face, belly to belly, contact sport, remember what I said? If he was in the world today, he wouldn't be doing this with PowerPoint and email and so forth. He gets them together, and he lays it out, and he gives that team meaning and attention, and he infects them with energy. And he lets them loose. Right? His job is to get the best out of those tools, and the tools he's got are those professionals in the room. So that's a sense of what he did. What else struck you in terms of your buzz groups? What else was important about leadership here, of this Virtuoso team? Matt? Right. Tell me what on the spacecraft that's working, right? What do we got that's good? So this trying to just constantly get it, and you want to get a status. No one knew what was going on, right? So a little bit of a shift in the beginning from panic into a clear sense of what do we have that's good. What else do we see here that we saw about good leadership? Anything? What struck your attention? Yeah. Okay, Kelly's saying what's really important here is trust. And I heard at this table they were talking about what's the culture of this team like that allowed him to do this. And now where do we see trust? How many people saw trust? Where did we see trust, and why was there trust on this team? How do you get to the state of trust? Do we see any inkling of that? What was he really good at doing? What did he spend most of his time doing? Up there on the wall. How do you build trust in people? Yeah.
I think that's the part where I feel like, especially Thomas Howard has said that, and he actually took other members of the next meeting. Like, definitely, I trust in them, like, what you obviously know what it is, so we're definitely going to stick to your plan.
Listening. Right? Always listening. And we have the young guy with the power. We don't have 45 hours, we got 16 hours. John, we can't run a vacuum cleaner on 16 hours, right? That's what we got. We got to shut everything down. Right? And he listened to him long before this incident. There must have been a culture of listening and paying attention to the experts. And each one of those people, that was the power person. He didn't turn to John and say,
John, what do you think, 16 hours? He didn't go around the room and say, do we agree with John? It was boom, we're going with that expert. So this listening is key. How many people feel that Gene Kranz is a leader on this thing? Show of hands. It's a great leader. How many people feel he's a leader? Show of hands. Is he the most important leader up here? Impressive? Yes? You know, to me, there's two other people. One just alluded to. There's two other people that I think are very important leaders in this little video case. Who were they? Anybody remember? Yeah, real loud. Pete. Is it Pete?
Yeah.
Peter, what do you think?
Clint Howard's character?
Who?
Clint Howard,
Clint Howard. Gee, oh, you are a Hollywood movie buff. Ron, thanks. We now know you know a lot about Hollywood. Let's see what you know about leadership, Peter. Clint Howard is Ron Howard directed this, Opie and all the, and Clint Howard's his brother, who was the guy sitting up front with the glasses. Go ahead. What happened? Make loud.
he directly challenged Francis Foley because he knew he was wrong.
This is something everybody in this room, you young people, you got to be thinking about this when you're out there, whether it's an ethical issue, whether it's an issue about what's right technically or not, and you're going to have these conditions very early on. Think about what Peter's referring to. When early in the video, he asked Cy was the guy in the pit, tell me what we have in the spacecraft that's good. Right? And I'm going to role play this right with you right now, okay? I'm asking you, and what are you going to tell me? Your side. And then, all right, then a few minutes go by. Then what? You say flight, and I say, what do you want? What did he do? Essentially, he did what? He said, we got to do what? We got to shut down the react valves. What does that mean, apparently, to shut down the react valves? We just saw the video. You can't go to the moon. Big issue or not? And remember, you don't remember this. It's 1970, NASA, Vietnam War. Everything to do with military or government is a disaster. And we've already beaten the Russians to the moon, so who cares? So not going to the moon, NASA's worried about basically closing shop at this time. There's a lot of, the money, the budget, pure expenditures. So Cy, this technical person, young, knowledge professional, said shut down the react valves. If I'm Gene Kranz, what did I do? I come over and say, what the hell's that going to do? You're saying it's dying, and then, but you don't just tell me, what did you do?
Stand up.
You right in the face, right? This is important. You're telling me to shut down the react valves, I'm running this thing, and what is Gene Kranz, and so what does that take from Cy's point of view? What is all of a sudden, who's the leader? This guy. This guy is challenging a legend of NASA, saying, we've got to do this. I don't care what, we got to do it. And what does Gene Kranz do? He says, shut him down. No questions, no ask, no debate. He shuts him down. So what does it take? What kind of culture and leadership does it take from Gene Kranz and Cy to establish this kind of relationship? Pardon me? You got to be right there, belly to belly, all the time. You got to trust them, absolutely trust them. Because at the end of the day, when Cy said shut down the react valves, did it work? Didn't help at all. The oxygen didn't stop, didn't matter. So the issue of trust, the issue of who's the leader, and et cetera, I think it's extraordinary that Cy did that and the guy with the power came up and said only 16 hours. Everybody thought he was crazy. So when you think about leadership, it happens from every seat. And what you've got to think about early on, are you going to stand up to the Gene Kranz in your organization? Are you going to have a Gene Kranz that builds that kind of trust? Are you going to have a Gene Kranz that listens to you? And more importantly, because you can't control that, are you going to listen to people who are working for you and build that kind of culture of trust? Because if you don't, how much of Cy's total ability and intellect was Gene Kranz getting? What percentage of his total brain, not much brain power, but of Cy's brain power was Gene Kranz getting? I say 100%. He was getting everything. The worst thing you want is people in the room not saying anything, or when the boss says something, what does everybody do? You're right, great, good point. That's a disaster, because the boss can't possibly always have the best ideas. So these issues of leadership, it has to happen from every seat. Just one other, there was a comment I heard that was interesting, and then we can, is Jennifer. Jennifer was talking about Gene Kranz, and I think you used the word humble. Where's Jennifer? Jennifer. It was you? Is it Rochelle? You're Rochelle and you're sitting at the wrong table. I actually knew that. I just wanted to see who was paying attention. I make some mistakes on purpose to see who's not paying attention. So you talked about this person being humble, and then there was some reaction around the table. Speak real loud, tell me what you meant.
Okay, well, as a leader, you need to have the capability of listening to other people and the willingness, you know, at first he was reacting at one point, but, you know, his authority was being challenged a little bit, and he just needed to take a step back and realize these are their lives we need to save, and maybe I don't have all the answers. So, you know, it does take a certain confidence, but in being confident, you have to be confident in the people you have chosen for your team and realize that you don't have all the answers.
You're talking, you're saying real important things about a lot of thinking that's been done about leadership lately. Confidence, being humble, yet being driven to achieve the goals, realizing you don't have all the answers. I mean, great leaders are going to say, I don't know. And they're going to go around and get the answers from people who do. Right? And there's a whole bunch of research, and there's these people, there's kind of this term called level 5 leadership, of great leaderships of industry that describe what Michelle is talking about. And Gene Kranz, in many ways, was a level 5 leader. Any other thoughts about what we saw in the case study about leadership? We talked about giving meaning, that's real important, giving attention. Trust me, when you go out there, you will be on teams, you will be in organizations, and everybody will not be on the same page. And you'll have huge PowerPoint presentations about what the strategy is. And everybody will essentially be scratching their heads, saying, I don't know what to do. In 10 minutes, Gene Kranz laid the whole thing out, walked out of the room, and everybody knew what they had to do. They trusted him because he listened to them, and they understood he was the kind of person that Rochelle described. Someone who realized he didn't have the right answers and got the answers from the team. I really hope you're listening to this, because when you go out, you should be thinking reflectively, what kind of organization am I in? What kind of leaders am I working with? And you should find those leaders who are going to get the most out of you. You are independent agents. You're going to work for a company, but you have got to manage your own career. You have your own interests in mind far more than any company that hires you. So you got to give it your best for the company, but also think about your own destiny. One other point I'd like to make that we haven't raised. Passion. Did Gene Kranz have passion? Or was he just kind of a cold, calculating automaton who did all the right things as a leader? What do you think? I'd like to show a video. 2 minutes, 1 minute clip. This is Gene Kranz, not yet. This is Gene Kranz in 1987, 17 years after the incident. This is the real Gene Kranz, talking about his experience for Apollo 13. Let's watch this for a second.
About the time that you see shoots, you'll see the cheering and the American flags come out. And then it's again tradition that you wait until the crew gets in the carrier deck, at which time cigars and the world map lights up. And shit. It was neat.
Guys worked hard to bring this one home.
reactions. What do you think about Gene Kranz? Passionate. I mean, 17 years after, he's one tough dude, right? And he's sitting there still reliving this moment. When he relives it, everything comes up. Why is passion so important in terms of great leaders? And it can be expressed very differently. I mean, we're all not going to have it the same way or illustrate it the same way, but why is passion so important for leaders? Any thoughts? Yeah, Rocco. So there's the hope, there's the goal, there's kind of the being able to energize again the team. Yeah, right. It's not something it's not something you can calculate in statistics. It's something much more difficult to get our hands around, but it's as tangible in a way, and the power might be more. Yeah.
Transcend just being a job.
Great. I mean, I'm convinced people know when it's more than a job. If you're out there and if you are working and you find that it's just a job and you're just showing up and you're in an organization where your boss you feel is just showing up and it's just work and you're collecting a great paycheck, I would rethink things. Great leaders have passion. People know about it. There's an energy they exude. They care about it. It's more than a job. And leaders have to have followers. And followers respond to people where it's more than just work. In whatever career you're going to be in, I don't care if it's profit, nonprofit, whatever, passion matters and it's part of leadership. Any other thoughts about Apollo 13, the case studies, Virtuoso Teams? Yep, it's Brendan. Yeah, go ahead. Passion's infectious, but what I want you to be doing in your brain is weaving a little bit of a web together. We're looking at isolated variables here. Passion, energy, listening, trust, setting up a meaning, vision and goals. They all tie together. If the team has a vision and goals and you give a meaning, and you cut through all the organizational stuff that makes that difficult, and they really listen and you communicate a meaning, you then have to let them succeed or fail. You have to back off. You have to trust what they can do. You have to listen to them. Right? You got to give them the energy and the optimism so they're going to keep giving it everything, 110% every day. So these individual variables we're looking at weave together into what are kind of a fabric of great leadership and great teamwork. One more point. Polite teams gives us polite results. Was this a polite team? Not really, right? They were arguing, fighting tooth and nail. What's the advantage of when they're yelling at each other? Somebody's saying, well, if we do this, and the other guy says, well, they're going to blow up and they die, and they're screaming back and forth. What's the advantage of that? I mean, what's the strategic advantage? Not just some emotional advantage. Why does it matter for people to be yelling and screaming? You're getting 100% of your brains. There's no appropriate thing. And sometimes it's got to happen. And the ideas are moving on that team. And the leader's job is to figure out where the best ideas are, who's done their homework, John with the power, and go with it. But you're getting 100% of their brains. They're not holding back. And at times you have to let things fly. So let's move now from Apollo 13, from your great thoughts and insights. I hope some of it's stuck. We don't have notes, we don't have books, I don't have displays, but some of it should be sticking in your big brains when you leave here about teamwork and leadership in your future or at BC right now. And let's get 3 people up here who are experts themselves, who have been effective leaders, who have thought about leadership, and we can get some insights from them, all right? And I'd like to first let me ask Norm Chambers to come up. And Norm, come on up. And I'm going to let all 3 of you, in your Q&A, kind of describe your backgrounds and so forth in some depth. But come on up. What I want to say with Norm and each of these individuals, because when I came back to BC to be a dean, I'm always trying to make things better, right, and improve and change things. And I've had a team around me, and the faculty have been great, the students have been great, but we need our alumni on board. We need their participation and their support. And I'm committed to the undergraduate education here, to be honest, totally committed to that. And we do a lot of different things in the Carroll School. Norm Chambers stepped to the plate and said, I want to help create a lecture series for undergraduates that allow us every year, several times a year, to bring in experienced people, executives, leaders from around the world, and interact with the undergraduate population at BC. So it will be enrich the experience for undergraduates forever. Right? So that's what Norm Chambers has brought to us, and he's bringing something else to us today, his ideas and insights around leadership. I'd then like to invite Chuck Clow. Chuck, come on up, if you could. Chuck is another BC alum. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to have a major speaker series at BC where we bring in people like David McCullough and other people who will be speaking to students and alumni and executives and really giving us kind of an intellectual prestige at Boston College and in the Carroll School that we don't have right now because we don't have the ability to have these kind of speakers in previous to Chuck's involvement. Now we do. So this is another big headline. It's another part of helping BC move forward. Chuck has been instrumental. And Chuck's own background, he'll discuss it in detail, but he's actually, before I even got to BC, was a personal hero of mine because of his intellectual contributions around the equity markets and where things are going to go with equities and so forth when he was the senior strategy individual at Merrill Lynch. And now he runs a firm called Clow Capital in Boston. And he would write, and I was out there with a little bit of money trying to do well in the stock market, and he spoke with clarity, and it was just, it's an honor for me to get to know him a bit because he is someone who has great ideas and backs them up with great thought. The final person I'd like to introduce is Bob Winston, my fishing buddy. Bob, come on up. Bob's made the Winston Center possible. The Winston Center will have the Chambers Speaker Series, the Cloud Colloquium. We've just hired a terrific faculty member from Emory University who will be involved with some of today's events later, and she's going to be a spokesperson around leadership. We're going to start research. We're going to do all sorts of things under the Winston Center banner. We hope to change the undergraduate curriculum in the Carroll School to introduce more ideas around ethics and leadership. So the Winston Center has really made all this possible. And Bob, and frankly, the whole idea for the Winston Center for Leadership and Ethics was Bob's idea. He had the idea before I got to Boston College. We've executed it. It was his idea. He's been supporting it from day one. He also has a background in the financial industry in one of the most successful firms, the Capital Group, the American funds and so forth from LA, and he might give some of his background, and very appropriate for discussing teamwork. So Norm, Chuck, Bob, thank you very much. Let's give them another round of applause. I'm just going to ask a few questions, and they're going to take my questions and run with them. I'd like to start with Norm. Norm, could you describe some of your thoughts about, in your experience, and you've had interesting experiences all over the world in the energy industry, now the construction industry, huge experiences, and starting off doing really interesting things and working with people like John Brown at BP and so forth, some of the best people in the world. What are some of the characteristics of great leadership at all levels when you think about the firms you have worked with, the organizations that you've helped make great?
I mean, it's very interesting because, as you say, I've been blessed to have had a number of experiences, both in Fortune 100 company, a micro cap startup in the tech side, a mid cap bricks and mortar type of experience, and as Andy said, I spent the first 20 years of my life, I should say my adult life, working overseas. And I, in fact, started as a deep sea diver, working on a barge in the North Sea, in the oil and gas industry, before I came back to Boston College and got my master's degree in 1982. But there's a couple of things that I've seen in leadership that I think are reflected in the video we just saw, and the things and the points that Andy has made. But I'd like to interject, if I could, one word before leadership, and that's called sustainable leadership. Because I think that particularly young professionals will be given and will seek and will see opportunities, much like we saw today, maybe not as dramatic, but opportunities to stand up, to seize the moment, to grab the nettle, and to fill in where there is a void in leadership. But I think that in many organizations, the opportunity to lead is oftentimes given by superiors who will take a chance in putting a young person, a young professional. It's certainly something that I look to do. And frankly, I try to provide opportunities for older professionals as well in their career paths. But I think the point is that leadership has a variety of style to it. We've seen charismatic, gregarious kind of leaders, and frankly, I've seen some very quiet, soft-spoken men and women of few words who have been equally effective. But it seems to me that when you kind of get through the stylistic aspects, from charismatic to introverted, if you will, there is something of substance that is underlying all of that. In a very real sense, I think there's kind of four aspects of that substance. The first is being responsible. Being incredibly responsible for your actions and the words that come out of your mouth. And I'm not debating the notion of impolite virtuoso teams, but everyone that we saw was responsible for the words that came out of their mouth. It was the most serious thing they could say. It was the most important thing they could say. The flip side of being responsible is not being a victim. Not being a victim to circumstances. I was sitting at the table and one of the, unfortunately, older gentlemen in the clip kind of was talking about what is. Well, we can't do that. And I don't know why that seems to attach itself to age, but there is clearly something about age that seems to get one vested in what is as opposed to what is possible. I think the other aspect of that substance is the ability for leaders to speak powerfully. And that powerful speaking is enrolling. Now, we talked about that when we looked at the video, but in actual fact, the notion was that speaking powerful enrolled others. Yes, the passion was there, and one could sense that. And frankly, in Western civilization, particularly American civilization, we really generally seek that out. We like to be with leaders like that. But I think that this notion about being responsible, about being focused, about creating a possibility, which is the fourth aspect of this, which provides opportunities and openings for others to create within the ultimate possibility. So everyone has a space to contribute. I think that's the essence of what we saw, and certainly is something that has struck me as being fundamental kind of in all leaders.
Well, Norm, let me follow up with this because I'm curious as to what you're going to say. When you look at the audience, for the most part, young people who are, many of them taking on active leadership roles at BC, have done so before they got to BC, and will do so beyond BC, but it will be in organizations or education or whatever they do, organizations and institutions. What do you think, looking back at your career and what you just said, what should they start doing now to be more effective leaders? Do you have any insights, or what should they be thinking about? How should they be just building their own personal capital and professional capital around leadership?
There is something in the notion, of intellect, and I think that the Jesuit education makes a contribution to our intellect in terms of who we are as people, and I think that we can make a lot of this, we can make less of it, but I think who we are, who we are as people in the matter of personal responsibility is fundamentally, critical. Because I think that goes to the whole essence of integrity. And I think integrity is critical to every aspect of your career. I think the capacity to work hard and not require lots of personal, maintenance, kind of people to keep you up. Not that we all don't need some picking up sometime, but this notion of working hard, harder than anyone else, being a net giver. How can I do more? Not how can I do less? I think is kind of where it's really at and what I've seen and what I've felt personally.
Bob and Chuck, and they're nodding their heads, and I am too, working hard. We can't control how smart everybody else is, but we can control how hard we work. And hard work pays huge dividends. I mean, great thoughts. And we'll have some time for questions in a minute. I'd like now to go to Chuck, and just a brief preamble, Chuck, that you can clarify, because I might be presenting this. I present this from kind of a naive point of view as an amateur outside the industry. But this goes back to the pre-bubble bursting days of the late 90s when Chuck ran Merrill Lynch's strategy team, which big team that people pay attention to what they say. And if many of you didn't live through when the bubble, everything was going up, everybody was making money, everybody loved it, everybody was happy, because no matter what you invested in the markets, you were getting rich for the most part. And Chuck and his team, very early on, as the market was going up and up and up, my recollection was Chuck and his team were saying, this is crazy. This can't last. He's saying this working for Merrill Lynch. They were very supportive of doing your best, but he's saying this in the face of a lot of investors and other people who maybe didn't want to hear that it couldn't last. So one of the things about leadership that I'd like to hear Chuck discuss is, as a leader, how do you individually and with your team formulate ideas? Because at the end of the day, leadership is about coming up with ideas that can make a difference, that can take hold, that can change things, right? I mean, you do it with ideas. As I said, you're not doing it with the strength of your back, you're doing it with the ideas in your head. So how can you come out with ideas, infect others with those ideas, and as a leader, stand by those ideas when they're not popular? And this doesn't just happen when you're running Merrill Lynch's strategy group, it's going to happen a lot earlier. To say things that aren't popular is part of leadership. Well, how do you do that? What does it take to be able to have the strength to do it and do it successfully for your own career? Chuck, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it really, the answer came up in the film clip where, I mean, the reason the leader scuttled a mission was because the people whom he was talking to really could support their position. And I think that's an essential element of leadership in any walk of life. Be sure you can support your position and you know you're right, so you have the confidence to really be effective. Maybe the best way to answer the question is just to tell the story as it evolved. But in the late 1990s, particularly in late 98, most of 99, into 2000, before things started to unravel, we did have one of the great stock market booms of the century. There were small technology stocks that, well, don't exist today, but then they go up 10, 20 times in a remarkably short period of time. There are any number of technology funds that doubled in a single year in 1999. So it was an easy time to make money. And there were two, it was almost like a perfect storm, because you don't get this too often, where there is a major new technology and an awful lot of liquidity in the economy and in the marketplace at the same time. And of course, the new technology was the underpinning of what we know of today as the internet. There were two elements to it. There, of course, were the so-called dot-com. By the way, when all of this happened, you guys were, some of you were in high school, some of you were in middle school, so you may not have been aware of all of the dynamics as they were going on, but it was a pretty emotional time in the business. There were two elements to it. One was there were companies that would become dot-com companies. They'd sell something on the internet or provide information on the internet. Obviously, a very easy to enter business, and because there was so much excitement, they'd formulate a business plan on Tuesday, incorporate on Thursday, issue a new issue on Monday and be on the New York Stock Exchange on Tuesday. I mean, that's how quickly that happened. And it was easy to kind of get caught up in it. What was really going on, though, is interesting because the market was being very smart. The financial market, especially the stock market, was smart, and people weren't. Let me explain what I mean. The internet is a fabulous, it's really a culture-changing event. But the internet was very expensive to emerge. We needed hundreds of thousands of miles of fiber optic cable. It had to be built and developed and buried. We needed hundreds of thousands of computer service. We need any number of computers. I mean, this cost multi-billions of dollars. And what the market made it made it very easy to raise the money. I mean, the market created the capital that created what we know of today as the internet. And the internet, the ability to support it, was created in a very short period of time. So the market was very smart. Unfortunately, a lot of people threw money at companies that really had no value at all. And so to a lot of people, the money was lost. But you have to understand, I think, the dynamic of what was going on, because that money was going to be raised one way or another because the technology was extremely dramatic. Well, obviously, most companies couldn't sustain their business plans and disappeared to nothing once the liquidity was removed. And I remember in March of 2000, in fact, Dean Boynton knows we started our firm in March of 2000 on March 1st, 2000. And the whole dot-com thing peaked, and the market with it, on March 10th, 2000. So in tongue-in-cheek, I point out that's another sterling example of my marvelous market timing capability. But the point is, from that point on, over the next 30 months, the S&P 500, which measures the largest measure of stock market value, it collapsed 50%. And the NASDAQ, which housed most of these NASDAQ, the technology stocks, collapsed 80%. So there was a lot of value that was lost. And really the key as an investment advisor, as an investor, is sustained capital through that period of time. But there was something else going on at the same time, and that is that there were a lot on Wall Street and in the economy who felt that the extraordinary gains in stock prices that we're seeing at that time were justifiable because corporate earnings in the aggregate were growing, not only in technology but in other areas as well. And I think this is where we kind of started to part company with others because many analysts on Wall Street would just extrapolate reported, companies of course report earnings every quarter and every year, and for the corporate sector as a whole, as personified by what we call the S&P 500, the largest stock market index, corporations were growing earnings, or at least they were reporting earnings growth of 17% year after year after year after year. Now, the economy grows 3, maybe 4. So to grow 17% year after year, you can do it for a while because obviously you can reduce costs, you can find new markets, there are certain, but after a while you have to scratch your head and say, where is it coming from? And I think where I parted company with a lot of other strategists on Wall Street is they would extrapolate those earnings gains out. And if you did that, of course, the stock market was worth the high prices at which it was selling. But there was something wrong. If you're making a lot of money, you should be building cash. I think even those of you who aren't accountants will understand that. If a company is making a lot of money, it should have a cash hoard somewhere. And that should show up on the company's balance sheet. But when you looked at the balance sheet as a whole, not only was cash not growing, it was actually declining. So companies were earning all this money and cash was declining. So that was one question. Well, the only possibility that would suggest that would hold water was if companies were spending on capital. In other words, if they were investing the money, well, then that would understand. They could be spending their earnings plus some of their cash. But there's another element that suggested that was not, in fact, the case, and that is that companies can spend their own cash and then they can borrow cash. Corporations can provide debt. They can borrow from you by issuing bonds. And the amount of bonds that corporations were issuing were huge. So when we simply added the cash that was running off and the amount that they were borrowing, it was clear that in the whole, the U.S. corporate sector was actually losing money. It wasn't growing 17% a year. Earnings had actually stopped growing, and it actually had started to decline for a while. Of course, as time went on, more and more people began to realize that that was going on. And here we are in 2006, and companies are still coming up with restatements of earnings that they reported back in 98, 99, 2000. Just 6 or 8 months ago, a whole host of insurance companies came out and said, whoops, you know, the numbers that we told you we were earning back in 98 and 90, well, we didn't. There's a New York Attorney General named Spitzer running around. But even here, 8 years later, we still have companies restating downward those earnings. So I think what it shows is that when you look at a business situation, you want to look at it from as many dimensions as possible, and don't just take what superficially appears to be the case at hand. I think that's certainly part of the lesson here. But the second one I think is just as important. I mean, to tell a lot of people who are making money hands over fist that you got to be careful. You make sure when you enter a situation like that that you do have your position not only well stated, well articulated, but well supported. I think that's essentially an important part of leadership. But I'll leave it one last thought, because I do think that the market in so many ways is smarter than all of us. But certainly during the great dot-com boom, during which fortunes were made and lost at the snap of a finger, the market was smart. We built the internet, and that was the really important thing.
Thanks, Chuck. On that answer, I want you to be thinking about that answer in a different way, which is, as is Norm and Bob, these individuals are not just very effective leaders, they are virtuosos in their own sense. And I really want, because this is, if you can get this message, by that I mean they really know what the heck they're talking about. They really know what they're talking about. And I've heard Chuck speak about the markets today, and it's like, listen to somebody who's a great painter in painting come up with ideas around these markets. It's the same sense of confidence and articulation and insights. And the message to you is, when you leave BC, and whether if you're a sophomore or whatever, and when you leave BC, which for all of you won't be that much farther, your learning just is beginning. What you should do here is you should be learning how to learn, and you should be building an appetite for learning that lasts the rest of your life. Because if you think you're going to get on and do great things with what you learn here, forget it. This should be about, that's just some short-lived knowledge and experiences. What you should be learning here is how to learn forever, to keep developing as a whole person, so you can stand in front of people like individuals like you're seeing today and what we just heard from Chuck, and you can speak about things and you know more about it than anybody. And that sort of technical competence is a key element to great leadership. And then also down the road, you can spot the pretenders from the people who really know what they're talking about. So that answer, and I think Chuck's articulation is a case study in itself, that you should be learning forever. You've got to be great at what you do and be a virtuoso before and as you continue to become a leader. Bob Winston, I have a question for Bob. Bob's company that he worked for how many years, Bob?
35.
35 years. It's the Capital Group. They run a series of mutual funds called the American Funds. And they are very high-performing funds, institutional funds, funds for people like myself, and all sorts of things probably I don't understand. But the American Funds is a very effective company. I think it's now the third largest, second largest. Thanks, I appreciate that. That was right. Thanks. I'm kidding. Second largest mutual fund in terms of, here, do you want this microphone? You can run this. What is it? Go ahead.
It's the second largest in assets under management behind Fidelity. There's a big article about it in the Wall Street Journal like last week or 2 weeks ago.
You're showing off. He can probably help you get a job there, too. If you graduate. I'm kidding around. I'm totally kidding around. But huge, successful company. And in an industry, what I'd like to direct my question to Bob is, in an industry that primarily, and I worked, as Dean Keeley said earlier, a lot with Credit Suisse, a lot with a number of these investment banking firms, which is always interesting to do leadership and teamwork with investment banking firms. It's almost an oxymoron. But most firms in this industry are star firms, kind of based on the star model. You go in, it's a very Darwinian system. The best and the brightest survive. The ones who don't survive have a great experience and go elsewhere. And that's fine. The American funds is very different. They really base their whole firm around a team concept. So all their mutual funds are run by teams. And this is a very different approach. So you have to meld the ideas of a lot of different really brilliant people into a cohesive strategy for investments. So and Bob has been part of the DNA of this firm. He was one of the people that created this firm. He didn't just work for him, he helped create them. So I'd like to know from Bob, how do you bring about, and what are the keys to that kind of teamwork? The ingredients, the secret success formula for great teamwork and leadership when you bring together high-powered individuals in a firm like the American funds where you're looking at, you know, investments and asset management and so forth. And what underlies it all?
Well, great. Thanks, Andy. Nice to be with you all. We are kind of passionate about teams, and we've been forming teams for about a half century now. We're a firm 75 years old. We don't read the newspaper, so we don't know what people are saying about us. We kind of focus on our client. You know, do good for your client, and the rest should take care of itself. But about, I think it was 1956, we really got serious looking at managing mutual funds on the team concept. Now, you can relax. I don't manage money. I oversee some sales. I used to retire a year ago, oversee some sales and, you know, client relationship and compliance and all that. But I do relate very closely with our investment people. So in 1973, I kind of headed up launching a new fund. This was a first sort of national effort. Merrill Lynch and others helped us, and it's called New Perspective Fund. We raised a couple $100 million, which at that time was unbelievable. And we was a fund oriented to growth internationally, global, and so forth. We frankly were ahead of the time. A lot of people say, what, invest outside the United States? Why? But now, obviously, that's kind of in vogue. But we, in that fund, for instance, that I think is $26 billion now, started with like zero, we used the team concept and the management of money. It really works. It takes a certain discipline to make it work, though. You've got to have trust, as we saw here. You've got to have trust that everyone's working together. Now, we're all competitive, and that fund, New Perspective Fund, is, I think, 7 distinct teams. Portfolio counsel, a lot of analysts with different amounts of experience, but everyone has a vote, and we want everyone to have a say. And one of the things I got involved a lot with interviewing, recruiting, we want people that are intellectually honest. We hope you're honest. You're not going to steal money from petty cash, but we're looking for people that are willing to stick their neck out. We expect it. We don't care who says what. We want to hear it. Because it's very important to an organization like ours. We don't want groupthink. You know, everyone can come in the morning and say, oh, that's great. That's a great idea. You know, I think I'll do some of the same. And pretty soon we're all going off the cliff together, you know, drinking the same Kool-Aid. We try to stop that. We look for all kinds of diversification in backgrounds, education, ethnic backgrounds, cultures, mix you all together and put you on a team. And the only way you're going to get on that team is if you're intellectually honest. You've got to take a stand. We've had some of our best investment ideas come from some of the youngest people. I remember years ago, way back, when Chrysler was bankrupt. One of our junior analysts did a lot of research, talked to the company, said, I think we ought to be buying some of this bankruptcy obligations and so forth. And he convinced some other people. He had to put his mouth, an effort where his mouth was, because he has money allocated to him. So, you know, Joe, great idea. How much are you buying? So we foster good communication by giving each of our investment people money. It's not play money, it's real money. And you're going to be paid how well your results come out. But it's a great way to foster teamwork. And secondly, we don't want our people to worry too much about their careers. We're going to put you in different situations. We're going to overpower you. People I've hired have always said, hey, you're going to be brighter than me, because I know that. They're brighter than me. And I'm looking for people, particularly in sales and so forth, that we could advance at least 3 steps in their careers. We're not hiring for today's job. Forget it. We've grown. I was the 101st employee. We got 8,000 worldwide. So we have to bring in people that can grow with us. They're only going to grow if they're intellectually honest, if they're sort of the quarterback of their own team. I really encourage people. Sometimes they'll come to me and say, Winston, I'm on a project. What do you think? I said, look, here's the deal. I'll tell you what I think, but you got to promise me you're going to talk to these 2 other people, okay? Then you decide. Yeah, I don't want you to just replicate what I think. You've got to get diversification of inputs. So I sent them on a scavenger hunt. Talk to these people too. Promise me that, and then you decide, you make your recommendation. Our analysts travel worldwide because we look at the world on a global basis. So the junior analysts come in after some nurturing, they're given a portfolio, you know, I don't know, a few $100 million or something meaningful, but you know, it's something that they have to be tracked. They call on companies, typically on Monday afternoon we have a green sheet room meeting. It's green sheet because analysts will call in, you know, 12, 15 companies, they'll commit their observations to paper, and then they go in to a meeting. There's a lot of gray hairs there, and so they have to make a case. It's communication. You've got to cut through the chase, convince people that your idea is good, and you can't front run your own idea. In other words, you could be a star if you said, you know, I have a great idea, so I'll buy some this morning, and I'll tell my associates this afternoon, and they'll start buying the rest of the week. That's not a good career move. You stay in line like the rest of the people. So I always encourage people, be the quarterback of your own career, frequently seek input, have passion, be willing to take risk. I'll give you a classic case. You know, I ended up overseeing sales of a fixed income funds. We really were not too good at fixed income. In 1989, you know, I had a full plate, but I went to a couple of people and said, look, I'd really like to see if I could put together a really top-notch fixed income effort. They said, really? We're an equity shop. I said, no, but there are people that could really benefit from fixed income. Institutions, people retiring, you know, baby boomers are going to eventually get older, and they could use them, demonstrate a stream of income. I said, fine, have a go of it. So I put a team together, bright people, you know, Harvard Business School, London School of Economics, and a lot of people, a couple from Boston College, actually. And we did a lot of research. We were selling $50 million a year, fixed income products. When I left, I'm not bragging, we were doing $1 billion a month. We just had looked at the market, we formed a team, we came up with the right products. I ran around the country talking to associates in different parts of the country, gave a lot of meetings, and said, you know, we can also throw as well as bat. You know, pitchers can also hit at times. So don't classify us as just, you know, one skilled person. We can also manage fixed income, and as a result, we do. We do a fairly credible job. In certain funds, we're in the top quartile. Other places, we're in the average area. But we've added a lot of value to our portfolios that we can help individuals get good streams of income. And there's some great opportunities outside the United States. You can get fixed income returns in some global markets that would equate to the long-term performance of the equity market. So we've diversified and less some risk. My advice always to folks, I get a lot of interns. These are people that are selected. We talk to 200, we hire 6. They're very capable like you, great advice, and they oftentimes will ask to work in my department, usually 4 to 6 months. So the first week or two, I said, look around. I say, look, think of an appetite you'd like to leave. When someone said, Matt, did Matt work with you? I said, yeah, he was here 3 years ago, he did this. Rather than he came to work, he read the Wall Street Journal, people took him to lunch, you know, the day filled up and pretty soon Matt's on his way to another assignment. So I challenge our people, look around, see what we need, talk to people, then we'll make a joint decision. If it makes sense, I'm going to support you, okay? So that means you've got to be willing to take risk. And I would say I'm never satisfied, I'm sorry, but I want to keep moving on. And oftentimes they say, I don't know, who can do it? I hate to go to Winston, he's busy, but you know, he can get it done. Because I know I can get it done through leading people. I don't do it myself. I get other people together, we look at it, we come back with a strategy, and we make it happen. So you all have a great opportunity to learn something about yourselves. And that leadership is a skill. I don't know of any way we can impart, you're going to be a leader now. It's a 6 weeks course, you come out, you're going to be a leader. It's a skill like, I don't know, bicycle riding or ice skating. It will stick in many cases. You got to couple leadership with integrity. Peter Drucker was big on this, saying following all his principles was not enough. You had to be had a high degree of personal integrity. Because do you want to follow a leader that doesn't have integrity? I wouldn't. So again, in our organization, we use teams. It's a hallmark. It permeates the whole organization, both in sales and service, client relationships, and certainly in the investment area. And it allows us, again, to have everyone thinking the same. We have diversification. We have one team that will be buying a stock, another team wants to sell it. They have passion for that. We crossed it internally, so we saved some commission for our shareholders, but now they have to watch that results. And we have trust. We'll have analysts that say, you know, my industry doesn't look good for the next couple of years. Let's say, fine. So they will say, look, I want to help the organization. I'm going to give my money to someone else. Now, we'll give them a competitive CD rate, if you would, for their return, and they'll let someone else has a passion, so they'll have 110% of assets to invest. So there's really good teamwork there. And teams have really helped us. They really helped. They've kept us out of some big disasters. But to be a team member, you got to be willing to stick your neck out. You got to, you know, from that seat, wherever you sit, you got to say, I don't agree, or I think one of the best ideas. And we really nurture crazy ideas. You know, some of the best decisions that we've made as a firm have come from a lonely, you know, 6-month-old analyst. Our compensation structure is there to kind of encourage that. There are years that a young analyst will make more than the chairman of the board of our company. And we cheer because that means that analyst has contributed a heck of a lot, because you're paid on how you contribute over a couple of year cycle. So teams are part of our sort of DNA. They've helped us. We keep massaging them, changing them. We don't think we have it all correct there. But it does work. And I'm guessing you're all going to be part of a team out there. It's hard for one person to make that big decision themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. And you will be part of teams. Your whole life is going to be part of teams. You might be a trader for a while, but you're going to be part of teams forever, working on projects. And from a firm that does it probably better than any in that industry. And I was out there a few weeks ago talking with their top leadership team, very thoughtful, and they're so committed to getting the most out of all their people. And Bob is kind of giving you some insights on how they do it. And it's about the people and getting the most out of them.